Okay guys, welcome back to the second and last part of the video series on precision reloading for long range precision shooting and hunting. The first things first, you're going to need a set of scales, either manual scales or a automated powder thrower. I'm just using a set of electronic scales from Hornady. They're the GS 1500 scales. And like any electronic scale, the first thing you want to do is you want to turn it on. You want to let it warm up. This one's been warming up for a little while. I just turned it off a moment ago. And then what you'll see me do is you'll see me place the little tray on, off and on, and just check that there's no fluctuation in the reading on the scale. Now, if you turn and do it when it's cold and you don't let the scales enough time to warm up, you'll notice it'll sit there and flicker backwards and forwards between 0.1 or 0.2, maybe 0.3. So just keep lifting it on and off. These will turn themselves off after a certain amount of time, so you've got to be pretty active with them. But the main thing is clean flat surface, uneven. Otherwise, that as well will give you false readings. Now that you've got that set up ready to go, you've got your powder trickler in case you need to add a little bit more when you start to throw your powder. You've got your powder funnel. The powder I'm using is an Australian brand of powder, which is ADI AR2206H. Now, ADI AR2206H is the equivalent to IMR 4585, I think it is. So, second, and the way to check that is in the back of the ADI powder chart or hand loaders guide. We've got a powder equivalence page, and if we come down to AR2206H, it's the same as Hodgkin's H4895 and the same as IMR's 4895, Vecton's TU5000, and Accurate Arms AA2460 powder. So they're your references, and quite often you'll have to check that because if I go into this ADI chart, there's no real data for the 168 grain AMAX. They have for a whole bunch of other weight projectiles or other brands in 168, but not for the AMAX specific. Which brings me to the Hornady manual, where I can then cross-reference and have a look and say, okay, IMR 4895, which is an equivalent, which means I can then go off that chart. Also, they got the Hodgkin 4895. Now I know through experience that the IMR 4895, going off the equivalent chart that I've got, the IMR is actually closer to what the the AR2206H chart is actually closer to the IMR 4895 than what it is the Hodgkin 4895. There is a slight difference in burn rate and what have you. It will do the same job, just I go off the and you'll notice here the IMR 4895, the minimum charge weight is 35 grains flat. The minimum charge weight for Hodgkin is 35.1. Now, the maximum range still ends in 43.3 grains for both, but I like to I just generally stick to IMR. IMR is one that's sort of, I find more it pops up with more of my combination of projectile usage and powder usage in relevance compared to the Hodgkin. But so that's what I sort of stick to. But anyway, so our minimum charge weight is 35 grains of powder. So now that we've got that, we know our minimum charge weight is going to be 35 grains. What I'll do from there is I'll work up in half grain increments. So I'll go from 35 flat, and I'll then make 4 rounds, or load 4 loads at 35.0. The reason why I load 4 is because when I go to the range, the first one is a fouling shot, because I clean my rifle bore in between each one of these load build-ups, so that I've got a fresh, clean ball, and it's going to be a cold ball shot for the first round. So the first one is going to be a fouling round. I'll then let the barrel cool down again, back to a nice cool temperature, and then what I'll do is I'll do my 3-shot string to check my grouping. Once I do that, rifle goes to the bench, gets fully cleaned again. When I say fully cleaned, it's only basically a powder solvent clean, some dry patches through it. Basically what I'm trying to emulate is exactly what would happen if I was to take the rifle from the cabinet, take the thing out to a hunting trip, and that's pretty much what the real world is going to be like. It's basically going to be a nice clean ball when I first take the thing out. The first shot I'm going to be shooting will actually be, it won't even be a fouling shot. It'll be the actual first cold ball shot, but there won't be much in it. The first thing I'll intend to do when I get to where I'm going hunting anyway will be to double check my zero, considering my elevation change, temperature change, everything else. The first thing I'll do is I'll check my zero. So it's going to get some fouling shots in the thing anyway before I actually take it out and go for a hunt. So that's tend the reason why I turn into a fouling shot first, then the 3-shot string. It might be a waste of projectile, a waste of powder, but that's just the way I tend to do it. The other thing I do is I track each one of those shots through a chronograph, and then I'll take the average of those 4 shots, and that's what I'll turn in and I'll write that down with that target. So that weight load will be at 70 feet per second, and that'll be the group size. Then what I'll do is I'll go up in half grain increments, like I was saying. So I'll go up half grain increments all the way to the just before the max load. So I won't go all the way to that 43.5 grains or 43.3 grains or whatever it is. I'll end up falling short, so I'll just double check our reference again. It's 43.3 grains, so I'll probably finish somewhere at 43 flat. I won't go the extra 0.3 of a grain, and the whole time when I'm doing that load development, I'll be checking for signs of pressure or overpressure at the same time. And if at any point it starts to get to the point where we're starting to get too much pressure, well, then I'll stop from there and I'll work with what I've got. I'll take the best of what we've got at that point, and then I'll make some more rounds, in 0.1 or 0.2 of a grain difference, until I find that that group tightens in as tight as it could possibly be. And then once we're at that point, then I know what my powder throw is going to be for what my weight is going to be for each cartridge I load. From then on in, it's just a matter of playing around with case overall length, jump or jam, just to turn around and make that a little bit more extra difference on on the accuracy. But I mean, if I'm shooting a quarter minute of angle at 100 yards, that's going to be perfectly good enough for me. I don't want to shooting. I mean, if I can get a shooting better than that again, well then that's great. But if that's shooting at least a quarter of a minute of an angle or just under half a minute of angle, that's quite sufficient for what I'm doing. So that's what we do. Anyway, guys, from there, like I say, we'll take a tray. Now with my my powder thrower, I'll tend to to get it right to where I'm setting it, I'll even though I'm only throwing 4 charges at a time, once you get it set to the first one, it's pretty easy to increment it out fairly fast to load your next lot, and it saves you a bit of hassle. So what I'll do is I'll go from there, and I'll run the powder thrower twice, so it'll be 2 loads, and I'll empty that in. And the reason why I do that is to make sure that chamber's full, and the actual throw is throwing exactly what it should be, or or what it is actually at the moment, what it's set to. So anyway, so now we'll go into the throw a charge. Alright, then with that charge, we'll throw that charge, and that at the moment is sitting at 35.0 exactly. So as I played around with it before and I set it before. But if that was to be under, then all I would do is I'd just take my trickler, trickle in a little bit more, and then I just wind out the slightest bit, and make the adjustment, and then just makes it a bit easier for the next 3 or 4 powder throws that I'm going to be throwing. Yeah, that's what I do for every load. But every single load, it's double checked on the scale. I'll take it off, put it on. This is the time-consuming part. Just to make sure that every load is spot on, because it's a development load, I might seem a little bit anal with double, triple checking everything like this, but I'd prefer to be spot on and get the good data, and the time you're going to take to do it, you may as well try and do it right. Get the data that you need, so that down the track you've got correct data that's always going to be there for you. You can log it, and that's what you stick to from then on in. More time spent now is less time spent down the track. So that's the way I see it, and that's just the way I do it. So yeah, once I've got that load, I'll pull that load in, and then we'll seat our projectile. In a minute, we'll get on to seating a projectile and case overall length and everything else. But the first thing I want to get onto is now I ordered these 168 grain AMAX. I know you guys have heard me piss and moan a lot about that lately. They've finally turned up 6 months after I ordered them, so they're not the easiest to get a hold of at the moment where I am, or at any time really where I am in my location. So the next best thing, which I can get hold of on a daily basis, which are always in stock, which really there's only very marginal difference between them, and that's the Spear 165 grain boat tail soft point. The boat tail soft point have got a little bit better bullet coefficient than the AMAX, but the AMAX, they both basically do the same job. Just I find the AMAX at least in the 155 grain, I tended to like the results I was getting from those. I'm yet to test these, at long distance. The Spear, the AMAX I have, and they shoot phenomenal at long distance. The Spear, although in 139 grain, as in the same as, the 130 grain TNT, out at 600 yards, I think I had about a 12-inch spread. That was out of the TNT. That was the big hollow point round, with a very low bullet coefficient. So, about a 12-inch to 15-inch spread with those. I mean, and their bullet coefficient was about 275 or something. So they weren't the greatest. But anyway, both those projectiles, are going to be used on deer and goat, soft skin targets out at long range. You wouldn't use something like that on a pig unless you had a really well placed shot and you weren't going for a shoulder shot. And really at that distance, you don't want to be playing around with that sort of thing. If you don't get the most optimum shot at that distance with those, and you hit a shoulder bone and they don't go through and blow apart enough, which is quite often they don't, because they're a lot softer, more frangible bullet. You won't get an ethnic kill. You'll end up having to try and track that animal down. They'll obviously die inhumanely. So, and that's not what we want. We want the most fastest, quick, most ethnical kill possible. This is the reason why we stick to these with the long range hunting. Now, if I was going to go pig shooting at long range, which most of the pig shooting you don't. I mean, I think the maximum they probably shoot, pigs is maybe up 300-400 yards. I'd switch over and I use the Nosler ballistic tip, 168 grain ballistic tip. They are also a good long range projectile for harder targets. Think more harder skin targets like pigs and what have you, and heavier skin game, heavier bone game as well. So they'll work quite well out at long ranges with those. The only problem is they retain a lot of weight, which is good for big heavy targets. But after they drop below 1900 feet per second, they don't open up. They don't mushroom as good as what they do. They're more meant for out to maybe 500-600 yards, effective range. With the velocity. So that's mainly what I stick to. Like I said, the spear boat tail soft points is what I use if I can't get the AMAX, because they're just as good as each other. Just my preference is the AMAX. But and yeah, just for the basic pig hunting and heavy game hunting, I use the Nosley ballistic tips. So that's just a rundown on the different projectiles I use. And now I'll give you a bit of a look at what all three look like side by side. Just a bit of a comparison. Okay. So as you can see, that's your 168 grain Nosley ballistic tip. That's your AMAX, and the other one's your spear bow tail soft point. So as you can see, they've all got pretty good cantilever on them. The AMAX being a slightly better, you know, more aerodynamic point compared to the bow tail soft points. So it'll be interesting once I do some playing around with those and see what they're like at a longer range. See if they're not bucked too much by the wind. See if you know, just the effects on that nose. That nose is a little bit out of round, I noticed on the soft points compared to the AMAX. The AMAX are, you know, usually all pretty quite good. So anyway, guys, that's what we pretty much go to you know, when we throw in our powder weights, cross-referencing with powder and whatnot. The other thing before I go though, if you guys out there decide you want to reload with the spear bow tail soft points, there's no online data for spear reloading. To get the data that I needed for the spear bow tail soft point 165 grains, I actually had to email Spear themselves and speak to one of their guys there and actually find out the minimum maximum load. Basically because I cannot in my local area get hold of a spear reloading manual. I'd have to order one online, and I'm not really fussed on ordering one online and paying extra shipping just for, you know, one style of projectile. I mean, I know it's also handy there to have, but if it had been in my local gun shop, I would have picked it up. So just to make it easy, I emailed them. So if anyone is after some information on reloading for 308 or 30 cal 165 grain bow tail soft point, give me a yell in the comments or send me a message, and I'll shoot that info across to you so you guys can have that as well. So anyway, guys, I'll just finish up here, and then we'll switch across to bullet seating, case overall length, and that sort of thing, and we'll get to you then. Alright guys, we'll catch you on the next part.